So now it's my pleasure to introduce Sharon Owens, Vice President of Pricing and Costing for the United States Postal Service. Sharon.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, excellent. I do have a prompter here. Okay, I know I'm not going to be the most popular woman in the room, but I do have thick skin, and like Joel said, I'm certainly welcome to questions as we go along, and there'll be plenty of time in the 75 minutes to take questions and have a very frank discussion. So I know the Postal Service sets pricing unlike any other agency ever or organization, and so I'll tell you a little bit about how we do it, why we do it, what we did, and potentially what you could expect going forward. So let's start with a little bit of a history lesson, and that is back in October of 2020, we filed for normal CPI-based price change. So since 2006, when the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act passed, each class of mail was capped at inflation. And the law said 10 years later, the regulator should say, how's that working out for you? So for 10 years, which turned into 14 years, about every October, we would file, September, October, we would file for a price change that we implemented in January, and each class was capped at inflation. Now, some products would have more or less than that. So we filed for our price change in October, and then at the end of November, the PRC came out with the rule that in fact said it's not working out for the financial stability of the Postal Service. You could claim it should have, but it didn't. And the Postmaster General talked a lot about what he inherited and what he's going to do different. But the regulator said, in fact, as the number of pieces per delivery point declines, because mail volume was declining, delivery points were growing, that really is quite the fixed cost and does impact our cost structure as density declines. So they gave us additional authority based on number of pieces per delivery point that change year over year, and that is in this chart, the purple bar. So purple bar was recognizing changes in cost structure that we couldn't totally control. One can claim that when we raise prices, volume declines, so I get it. And then the other piece of authority they gave us was to cover our retiree benefits that we had defaulted on. We stopped paying into our, retirees got paid, but we weren't setting aside money in the fund that we were required to do. We were defaulting on obligations. And so the regulator said, we will give you authority to over 5 years cover the market dominant share of our retirement obligations that for past due, right? So that's the blue bar. So we got that authority in end of November. And so the way it was going to work, we file a report with our regulator every December, and they say calculate these numbers, and then by the end of March, they will tell us whether we got the math right. And then once they tell us whether the math was right, then we were free to use it. So the way that price changes will work going forward is that we will calculate how much the purple bar and the blue bar every December. The PRC will confirm it in March, at the end of March, and then we're free to use it, this additional authority, once per year. So what the pattern that we got on that in August was, we had just gotten this authority, we had just done a regular CPI price change, and there were some other regulatory hooks that we tried to get an exception, and then we had to wait 60 days. So what happened, there were 2 price changes to whoever asked me last night in 2021. It was in January, as usual, and then we used that authority in August. That red bar reflected about 8 months of inflation from when we had last taken a price, last calculated, restarted our inflation clock. So we filed the price change in August, and holy cow, look at the size of that purple bar. And that was because, as we were just hearing, COVID really impacted mail volume. So mail volume plummeted, which meant pieces per delivery point just cratered. And that's what resulted in that large purple bar. Now, as we go forward, we are operating, so that was FY20 over FY19. Our fiscal years are October to October. We come into 2022, and we're working off of 21 over 20. And 20 was so low that 21 looked pretty good. So now the size of the purple bar is very small. I mean, 0.6% roughly. So as long as mail volume remains relatively stable, the amount over inflation that we're able to take should be fairly small. As long as the industry is healthy, and we certainly understand the headwinds, as long as mail volume remains up, that we find power in the mail, that we find ways to add the ROI, which I understand includes keeping prices as low as possible, but that purple bar should remain fairly constant and not terribly large. Then we get to the blue bar, which is retiree health care, not just retiree health care, it's our civil service and our federal employment retirement systems, what we have to pay into it. That blue bar is a 5-year authority. Remember I said it was going to be spread out over 5 years. It was a use or lose. If we take price based on that authority, we have to start paying the government back for what we were defaulting on. So that blue bar will expire in 5 years. So when we looked at it in January, how was inflation running? Now the red bar is huge. The purple bar, we said mail volume was constant. But when the Postal Service Reform Act passed, the new law that Joel was talking about, when that passed, they waived our, we don't have to pay retiree health benefits. We don't have to have a pre-funding mechanism for that. That saved about 0.3%. Not huge, it was something, but the formula and the way that the regulator set it up is if there were any changes, the formula could adjust to account for the fact that we had less obligations for that. So you'll see that the blue bar went down, but the red bar continued to grow. And in fact, at the time that we filed the price change, the annual change in inflation was 7.9%. It's now 8.5%. The next figure will come out in May before the prices actually get implemented, or right around, before the prices get implemented. So it kind of offset, the growth of inflation with the reduction that we had from the retiree health benefits. Also, that 5.14 just reflected 8 months of inflation again, from when we filed in May to when we filed again in April of this year, April 6th. So what we're planning, and then I'll go into what this means, what we're planning is a 6.5% price increase for classes of mail that are compensatory. There was one other piece in the legislation for those products where the revenue wasn't covering the cost, partly driven by the fact that when the law went into effect, periodicals were fairly underwater anyway. They never quite broke even. And our package services that had media mail and bound printed matter, that was teetering on not covering its cost. We got 2% more, so whatever this average is, 6.5, 2%, not 2 points more, not 2%, so 8.5 for periodicals and package services. Okay? Now going forward, when we did this, we get the authority at the end of March. The governor decided, let's use it as soon as we can get it, and the soonest we could use it last year was August. But we technically, if everything goes smoothly, the soonest we can raise prices will be in July, once the PRC blesses the calculation of the blue bar and the purple bar. So every July would be the soonest we could raise prices using the annual additional authority. So then the question is, do we get on a July cycle, or do we carry it over at some point and get back on a January cycle, or do we do both? And so our team brought forward those scenarios to our governors. Here's what the July only cycle looks like, here's what a January cycle only looks like, and then here's what twice a year. So the governors announced, let's inform the industry to be prepared for twice a year price increases. What that would mean is that in January, we will just have 6 months of inflation. So it would just be the red bar in 6 months worth. And then when we raise prices, if we did, again in July, it would be 6 more months of inflation, plus the blue bar and the purple bar. Okay? So no decisions have been made. The governors, and we are required to give forward guidance. So that was the forward guidance that we had because one of the factors is predictability and stability. So to be predictable, we should count on twice a year increases. There will come a time if the red bar is so small, 6 months of a really small red bar would make it very difficult or not worth doing a price change. We haven't exactly calculated out how small that would be, but there comes a point, given some of the regulatory constraints about pricing underwater products in compensatory classes, 2% more than the average, that we would have to raise a price and then lower it to raise the underwater prices more. So just trust me, there comes a point that 2 times a year won't make sense. So as the Postmaster General said, he is working hard on getting our cost structure back in line. But just like all other businesses, the impact of inflation on our labor contracts, with COLAs, the timing. So the total authority doesn't end up being that much more if we do it 2 times a year, but the timing of trying to catch up with inflation, which will lag the way we do it, becomes important. So that's something the governors will be evaluating. And as long as inflation is high, all I can say is that the business case of doing it twice a year will be strong. Not that they will do it, but that's what we gave the forward guidance on. So why don't I pause right there, because this is the worst part of the presentation. And just if you want to have dialogue or if you want me to wait till the end. Bob.
So one thing I do want to clarify is non-compensatory classes, you have the additional authority once a year.
Once a year.
For non-compensatory products within a class, though, if you're doing twice a year, you get that additional 2%, such as marketing mail flats, twice a year, so it's a 4%.
Yes, so that is a key distinction, which we take, and that's why there is a point where if inflation is low, hitting an underwater product like flats, 2% more than average twice a year means you have to reduce something else. So whenever one product gets an above average increase, another product is going to get a below average increase. And if it's so low, you would actually have to reduce a price in order to keep taking 2% more on an underwater product. So it's no additional authority for us, but it is squeezing the balloon within a class where we have that constraint. Yes.
So the challenge we have from a marketing perspective is that most of the budgets, you start figuring in, Q4, right? So you're forecasting for the next year, and you're planning what your mail volume is going to look like. I think everyone became very accustomed to, reaching out to us. We go out, we do a strong educational process across the organization to say, hey, these rate changes are coming, let's get in front of it. They put the budget together. And, they've been banking on 2.5% in January. Okay, granted, rates have changed, post office needs to right size. We're not here to argue that. The thing that we have a challenge with is that if you put a January rate hike together, I think we can live with that and say, hey, this is the expected, what we think it's going to look like. We bake it into next year's forecast, and then everyone's whole. And so we know exactly what our mail volume is going to look like. What happens when we have 2, like we did last year, right? No matter how much we educate our business partners, they will come back to us and say, hey, we have no choice now. There's no budget. We can't go print money, so we're going to have to reduce our mail volume. So we're not alone. The entire industry does this, right? You reduce your mail volume, and then it impacts the density. So now mailers are mailing less, and the Postal Service says, well, we're going to have to increase the rates. And I think that's what we're trying to get in front of, that if we could do a better job forecasting, and granted, I know the 2-year, you guys are giving us some great information to forecast, and we understand it. It's working with the marketing teams and getting them to buy in. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And you guys think you're thought of as being bad. You have no idea the pushback we get in the organization. It's awful. Yeah, we're right there with you. We're standing with you.
So I get how important forward guidance is, and so I've really challenged my team because we will just be in perpetual price change mode, that let's try to get ahead of it as we go to our governors about a January price change. Let's lay out, what would the price of stamps be in January? What would that mean for the next July? What would that mean for our underwater products? And let's, at a high level, we won't know the individual rate design. None of us will know what inflation is, but we can take what the forecast is. We use Global Insights as our predictor of inflation, and we start designing rates around what we think inflation is gonna be, and then we have to true it up when the final number comes out before we do our rates. So that's what I wanna do, is try to get in front of, well, what would rate designs look like at a really macro level? If we can get our governors to buy in, that that's directionally where we will be going, then we would be able to give the industry the forward guidance, subject to change, subject to something happening in the industry, inflation or whatnot. But certainly, as I was talking to some nonprofit mailers last night, and they didn't see a 17% increase coming in their rate cell, we need to work through that for them. And if that's where we're gonna continue to have to take price, the least I can do is give you forward guidance so that you can start planning. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is, because this is still new for us too, what does 2 times a year look like for us? Our cap math is what I call it, which is where we try to balance the secular decline and where a particular product is, whether it's growing, whether it's declining, and then what the elasticity is. There's a mathematical formula that would optimize that for the Postal Service perspective. Then we've got to step back and weigh public policy considerations against what the cap math would say. But over time, what we've been doing has been the same products that get above average, partly because it's required by the PRC, means the same products are getting below average because they've demonstrated high elasticity. Now, flats, if it was up to the Postal Service, we would not be taking 2% more on flats because they were declining anyway, and they have a higher elasticity. But they're underwater, and so we're constrained. Cap math would say, don't do it. And in fact, we didn't do it until the PRC made us. We were just gonna have to cover that as a money losing because letters were growing, and the Postal Service is better off increasing rates on products that are growing because they maybe can absorb it more. It's still a competitive, viable product, and you actually achieve the revenue against a growing product. When products are declining anyway, the revenue actually doesn't come in, so. More questions? Okay, I will keep going. You can stop me at any point. The resources, this is where as soon as, and we did not do a good job with that this year, but as soon as we file the case, we try to do it a webinar the same day or address MTAC, but we set up a series of webinars, and we put the files out on our website. That's postalexplorerpe.usps.com. We try to put in a lot of different formats. Some people like the CSV or the Excel. A lot of our smaller mailers like to look through the notice 1, 2, 3. That's my cell. How did it change? So we want to put all that together, the postage statements and so forth. It was a little clunky this year. We found a lot of errors. It wasn't ready same day, so I'm working with the other departments to make sure that goes a little smoother next time, and that we have QC'd files online on the day that we file so that everybody can start doing their analysis right away. Because some people were starting to do analysis and then the phones are ringing. This rate doesn't match whatever, so we had an opportunity there, so we will do better. So we put our resources online and allow people to start understanding the impact it would have. Now, finally, a piece of good news. I always like getting to this slide, so I have to put this up front, which is, well, what are we doing? The Postmaster General says, oh, there was nothing in the plan about mail. And then his retort is, but I'm not stopping anything. What they were doing, I'm encouraging them to keep doing. So our marketing department, led by Steve Monteith and Tom Fody, we spend time thinking about what would add value to mail, what would give mail a better ROI, what are some of the sexy things you can do with print, and let's encourage mailers to try it, the printers to try it, and so we give a bit of a discount to try, I call them sexy things. So whether it's the personalized color trans promo or using some of the emerging technology, the informed delivery Lewis talked about, really getting those campaigns going and trying that multimedia campaign tied to print. My favorite is the tactile, sensory, interactive, really fun mail pieces. But then just basic things like mobile shopping. Mobile shopping isn't that new anymore to put QR codes in your print, and then the earned value for first-class mail to encourage that you have that envelope in and encourage people to mail their checks or replies back. So over time, these incentives these promotions are getting bigger. It used to be 2%, some are now 4%, 2, 3, 4, and they're lasting a little bit longer. So the one time when we didn't have any governors, and so we didn't have approval to do promotions, a lot of blowback. We're making sure that doesn't happen again. Our governors are supportive of promotions. Our management is supportive. So I think you can always expect that we will continue promotions. If something's not new and novel and sexy anymore, you probably don't have to give a discount there. Let's come up with another place where you can give a discount. But the way cap math works, we're given a discount here, it just means somebody else's prices are going up. We still have to come back to the 6.5%. So anyway, promotions are here to stay, and then there's a whole MTAC work group on what are working, what other things should we be considering. And so we are always open to what you would want to try in your business, what the technology would allow us to do with print, and to give discounts and incentives to get that going. Any questions or comments about our promotions? Bob?
With the price change last year in August, the Postal Service at that point in time announced all the promotions for 2022 for this year. So now with the price change that's coming in July, nothing was announced as far as promotions for 2023. I know one of the feedback from the industry is the more advanced notice you can give the industry to prepare for promotions, the better. How do you see that working for 2023 promotions?
Yeah, that was a great question, and it came up at MTAC, and we really do, every time we talk to the industry, you always give us something to think about, and it's like, well, crap, sorry, but if we don't do a January increase, we've got to get promotions back out there, and so how quickly can we do it? Now, so Tom Fody and Monteith are working on additional promotions, and whenever you do a new promotion or radically change something, it's going to impact the cap math. So we need to, and one reason we hadn't done it is because they were still working through what new promotions or how do we want to modify these promotions. So we do know that we need to do them sooner rather than later. If we have a January price increase, they'll probably be folded into the announcement in October, but to the extent that we can start signaling what we're thinking about and new things that are coming up, we like to try to do that. Back to the forward guidance, the promotions, the planning, the technology, the programmers in the room that need to know in advance how to change all their files. We do try, if there's going to be a structural change, the industry has asked for 6 months notice, so that's coming up. So we do try to go to our governors and like, hey, we're going to signal to the industry, we're thinking about this, some sort of structural change, a new promotion, so that they can't go, oh, no, you're not going to do that. But it doesn't mean they voted on it and approved it. Because of that, some programmers are like, we're not going to start programming until the governors say it's a go. So we'll have to work through whether it's a firm, this is going to happen, start doing it, versus Postal Service is planning for this, maybe you should too. So we still have a bit of cadence to get with our forward guidance, but we We certainly know that whether we do a January price change or not, there will be required a filing for promotions, and I think that's certainly something management is going to recommend to our governors, and I wouldn't anticipate they would have a problem with that. So is there a chance we would do a promotion for Bound Print and Matter? Yes, always a chance. So I would encourage you to get that back to the marketing team. Bound Print and Matter flats are profitable. And in fact, when we had, and I'll get to this, when we had to take a higher increase on the Bound Print and Matter parcels, Bound Print and Matter flats got a windfall, only a 4% increase, I believe. So as long as a product is profitable, then doing a promotion to encourage that certainly makes sense. Whether we would do it for Bound Print and Matter parcels, people have asked, would we do it for periodicals? Technically in periodicals, it's a zero-sum game. As I'd said before, you offer promotion here. Whoever's not using a promotion, their price goes up. So, but just a little trickier, and I don't know that we've gotten a legal opinion on doing promotions on underwater products. But we do it for flats, and flats are underwater, so technically, I guess we could. We do. And in fact, one of the metrics for success, I know Hamilton asked the PMG for his metric of success, is even our salespeople and hopefully printer salespeople and so forth, when you go in and talk to someone about promotion, it's just another opportunity to talk about the value of mail and whether they do the promotion or not. But the way our sales team does it is if we have initiated a conversation with a customer to talk about a promotion and we close the deal, we give the credit to the fact that it was promotion. But we do, in fact, we have to report to the regulator, and it gets back to doing the CAP math, how many people, unique companies participate in it, what's the volume of mail that went through each of these promotions. I don't know them off the top of my head, but we do track it.
And we can find that on the site?
Probably not. It is public information. We file it with the regulator, but I don't know that we've packaged it up and put, volume participation online. But it's, I believe it's shareable because it's public.
Sharon,
Hamilton.
question about profitable products. Are the changes being envisioned by management going forward that the PMG spoke to last night? Will that make all products profitable?
Great question, Hamilton. As you challenge the PMG, we are working through what does the final network look like. We've been working with some people in the room as we've been thinking about how to realign our network. And we thought we were there. We thought we had the solution. And then we had a go, no-go point, and it was a no-go. So we had to re-envision what the network would look like. So we're starting over again. We're very far along, but in what it involves would be taking, right now, we have 3 different mail streams for flats. We have a first-class mail stream, a periodicals mail stream, which is different and has different service standards in first class, and a marketing mail stream, which has different service standards in first class and periodicals. And so they go in 3 different directions throughout our network, and it's quite the spaghetti. And as flats decline, those economies of scale of pieces in a container, it's suboptimal for all flats. And so the vision would be to, especially now that first class mail is a 5-day product, it's on the ground, we can now merge periodicals and marketing mail flats into the runs where we're doing first class mail, and it'll all end up traveling together. So we're really excited about what that opportunity is. It's obviously gonna reduce costs, but we haven't quantified it yet because we haven't put the fine point on exactly where they sync up. We're starting to look at the data, and this mostly affects outgoing flats that are not drop shipped. But that will be part of what will come out of it is a quantitative analysis of how much cost does that bring out, take out of the system, and then we'll go back and look at what that would mean for cost coverage. But we haven't gotten that far because we're still working through what exactly the network would look like. Steve.
Sharon, hi. Do you believe that these promotions are the most important thing that that the marketing group in the Postal Service is doing to promote mail right now? And also, do you have data or a general feeling about how successful they have been over the number of years you've been doing the promotions?
So the thing that I'm most excited about that the marketing department is doing is educating future marketers on the power of print. So we're getting into college and universities, and we're getting the professors to teach mail again, to teach the value of print and how to do ROI and so forth. And it's not just all about mobile campaigns. No offense for those that do that or whatever, but teaching mail again, teaching the value of print, sharing our research about the open rates, the visits to the mailbox. I think that's really exciting to educate decision makers on the role that print would play in their marketing mix. So I think that's most important. This is just exciting. This is just how to make mail more sexy and a little incentive to do that. But to me, it's about helping future marketers understand the value and the role and a consideration that print should be in that consideration set. And so back to how I answered that question, we do know and we do track how many closed sales we get by using promotions as a door opener to talk about mail. So it is tracked. Anything else? If you don't ask me a question, we'll go into the numbers slide. Oh no, this is still good news. These are still incentives. So we didn't jack with it. We didn't change the fact that yes, seamless still has value. We want you to do seamless. We didn't change it. I'm sure many in the room would say, could you increase it? Again, if we increase a discount, that just means somebody else's price goes up, but there's still an incentive for full service. There's an incentive for seamless. And then we did take price in the fees, the permit fee and the periodicals fee. Okay, first class mail. Everybody know the stamp price is going to be 60 cents? That's always the headline, and in fact, that's where we start when we do pricing with our governors, is that we have to determine what is that consumer rate going to be, what's the headline, and then the way that we're regulated based on discounting, based on how much the Postal Service saves when the mailing industry does work share, pre-sorts, barcodes, or so forth. Really, it will determine the rest of the price. So we have finally divorced the meter mail price from the stamp price, so we set those two independently. We set the stamp price, then from the meter price flows the rest of the letter mail prices. And then we this is the first year that first class mail flats were underwater, so that 2% more, 2 points more applied. My analyst really likes to price the first class flats price at twice the letter price so that any consumer that's using stamps can just put 2 stamps on it. It's not a must-have, it's just a simplicity in the rate design. And then the rest of the price for first class flats comes from the additional ounce rate, which you can see went up. I think it was last year, maybe 2 price changes ago, we also divorced the non-machinable price from the additional ounce price. They used to be the same. The greeting cards loved using a butterfly stamp, whether it was a non-machinable card or a heavy card, but in fact, non-machinability cost a lot more than the additional ounce. So we divorced those 2 prices. Cards, first class postcards, were struggling to cover their costs. And so they got a higher than average increase. And the PMG got asked this once, and what is the postcard price on their single piece card? 44 cents would be the right answer. I thought I knew it, but when he got asked, when he first got the job, I didn't know the price either. There are thousands of prices. I didn't know the price of a postcard. I guess I don't send cards when I travel like I should. But the pre-sorted cards, one of the things that we've been trying to do to add value to mail is, based on feedback from the industry, we made the size of a first-class pre-sorted card larger. So you can still qualify for the card rate instead of the letter rate, when you mail a larger card. A lot of work went into it, and it was a gamble how much would come from letters buying down to a larger card, how much would be marketing mail buying up. What we're seeing is very strong adoption of this larger card size, and we believe it's new business. There could be some cannibalization, but we believe there's new business. So very excited about the value of this larger card, and again, as things are growing and have value, we take more price. So we did. And then outbound, international outbound, like a 1 ounce piece to Canada or anywhere would be $1.40. Getting into, this gets real detailed. We de-averaged some rates. We added more pre-sort levels. And the industry pointed out, hey, Sharon, do you realize, and this was last time, when you created multiple price points for non-auto letters, you set the non-auto rate for AADC equal to the barcoded rate, the auto rate. Well, no, I did not. It was a valid rate design from the regulator point of view, but based on that feedback, we make checklists of rate relationships. There are thousands of rates, as you can see, and so anytime you say, hey, keep this rate relationship in mind, we add it to our checklist, and in fact, it is also a valid rate design to price barcoded mail lower than non-barcoded mail. So we fixed that. And then we did one other simplification or structural change in the first class area, and that was simplifying our qualified business reply mail so that the intention that people who are using business reply mail would apply an intelligent mail barcode. We can use intelligent mail barcode accounting to calculate the postage due much quicker in an automated fashion. And so we've made the price the same for all qualified BRM up to 3.5 ounces. Any questions about first class? Not the key audience in here, but then on the commercial side, just as we'll get to in flats, it's the rate relationships are so key. And so rate relationships are, as I mentioned, based on what the Postal Service says when the mailing industry does work, and based on our cost avoidances, which the commission dictates how we calculate the methodology used to do that. That was what we appealed or tried to do something different. And they only partially approved it, which meant that the incentive to prepare 5-digit first-class mail letters is getting wider. I think $1 per 1,000 more. And then there's also 10 per 1,000 to sort the mail, to prepare the pre-sorted mail versus the meter mail. Questions? You're like, this is the boring part. Okay. All right. There's one more structural change that we did that impacts probably many of you in the room. We've started introducing container incentives to reflect the fact right now with marketing mail, the price is based at the piece level based on the pre-sort level of the bundle. Well, bundles on mixed containers cost a lot more than bundles on more finely pre-sorted containers, so we're starting to work that into our rate design, and in fact, we extended the incentive to place the high density plus and saturation flats onto pallets or containers that can be cross-docked to our post offices and not require bundle sort. So we've started to do this over the past couple price changes, and in fact, in the future, we are looking at now creating an incentive just for a plant pallet, an SCF pallet. So we haven't done that in the past. These are 5-digit pallets or post office scheme pallets. We will be looking into creating a discount to put mail on plant pallets. So, which separates it from mail on mixed pallets. And that'll be really important to our future network. Where we want the mail is going to be in the destinating processing facility. And if it's internet origin, just to be able to have it cross-docked through our system and get to the place where it's processed. Okay, marketing mail, a big balloon, a lot of different products in it. And so marketing mail as a class is compensatory, but there are products within the class that are not compensatory. So you see, we only got 6.5. We got 6.5. I don't want to minimize how big of a number that is. Okay, so we had 6.5. It's less than 8.5. And then we have to spread that 6.5 amongst these products. Any product which doesn't cover its cost has to be at least 8.5, and that's carrier route flats, parcels, and I believe we've called out high-density flats on here separate. We haven't always separately the cost of a high-density flat has been buried in work papers. If you dig in, it's not a product category. It's part of a high-density plus saturation product category. But that rate category does not add as much value. It gets a much lower price point, but we don't save as much. So I've been signaling that that rate cell is in need of adjustment. So what you'll see here that jumps out is EDDM retail. I got an earful about how did you lower that price. As the Postmaster General said, we're going big with trying to talk to local community, local businesses in towns, have our postmasters be ambassadors to talk about accessing our post office network for same day, next day delivery of their packages or their documents. We have now rolled back EDDM, which is a saturation mail going to every door direct mail, roll the price back so that our postmasters, again, have that hook of something they can talk to small businesses about not only can we do your fulfillment, but you should consider advertising through print with the Postal Service and target businesses or buyers in the local community. So it's another way to do a promotion, which is just change the price, and then if we change prices again in January, it's likely that we will raise it back up. EDDM retail, though, is still more expensive than the commercial EDDM. Rate relationships, and I know that we want to spend a lot of time on the incentive to drop ship, and so I will have some of that in here. For many years, I had to stand in front of mailers and say, we had to narrow your incentive to drop ship because there was an error in the calculation and we had been over-rewarding drop shipping of letters. Finally, we caught up, and as our cost to move mail around increases, then the cost avoided when you, or Quad does it, increases. So we are now back to widening the discount to bring letters to our destination facility. $2 more per thousand to take it to the NDC, $1 more per thousand to bring it to the SCF, and then same, a little bit different with saturation to have the incentives be about the same, I think now. Okay, lots of rate relationships and flats that we try to keep track of. And the key here, the good news here, is that the incentive to have the mail preparers or printers pre-sort and drop ship the mail is increasing. So there's $12 more per thousand to bring flats to the SCF, or our processing facility. And it varies across whether it's a flat, which is a product category separate from the carry route bundles of flats, separate from high density and saturation. And a lot of that is driven on the weight per piece, that the average weight per piece in these different product categories is different. And our cost driver for transportation is cubic foot mile. We use pounds as a proxy for our cubic feet, and therefore the weight per piece determines, the average weight per piece is really determining the cost avoided. But for any piece, you know, the size of the discount, the size of our pass-through of the cost savings would vary. And I'm going to get to a slide for that in a moment. And yeah, and people are going to squint their eyes like, what are you talking about? I learned a lot by asking a deeper dive. Again, we use pounds, which is what I'll show you, but when you convert that to pieces, we've got, as you know, a piece rate. So piece rated pieces up to 4 ounces, and then the pound rated pieces. As I asked my analyst, and I guess it's on this next slide, oh, this is letters, let's just do that, and then I'll get into flats. You can see, so the orange bar is the discount, and the blue bar is our cost avoidance. And if you go down to the bottom right, that's to bring mail to the plant. We had to keep shrinking the discount because it was more than our cost avoidance, but now we've got them even. So you'll notice, and many of you will probably ask, well, why aren't you passing through 100% to bring the letters to an NDC? Well, the issue gets back to our network redesign. We are trying to, as I had mentioned with flats, we want to get the market dominant products all in the first class mail stream. And our first class products don't go through the NDC. So we're working through what is the role. We want to get marketing mail out of the NDCs and into the first class network. So I didn't want to widen that discount and end up with mail at the NDCs until we right size our network. 100% pass through, 100% of the savings to bring mail to the destination plant because we know that's where we want it. And over time, we can work out if there's an intermediary point above the SCF or final processing plant where we want the mail, we can get that sorted out. So on the letter side, kind of get it. On the flat side, again, at the SCF, you can see that the discounts are meeting the cost avoidance. And in fact, as I was saying, the discount to bring it to the SCF grew and is now equal to our cost avoidance, as it's been for the past couple years. On the DNDC, similarly, we didn't want to over-incent mail going to the NDC as we work through the future vision of how to flow marketing mail flats. And that was flats, and then we calculated it for carry route, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to be a popular slide. You guys will want the orange bar to equal the blue bar, but it gets back to the average weight per piece. And and I tried to get the team to convert this to pieces and not pounds, and we will work on that view of the data later. So this is how it looks for carry route. Any more questions then on rate relationships, drop shipping from this point of view, anything on marketing mail? Bob?
So you touched on it, but I'd like you to maybe speak to it a little bit more. The future of high density.
Okay. So high density, back in the day, or it still is, to qualify for high density, you have to have 125 pieces per carrier route, and that's considered high density. Well, back when there were 400 delivery points per route, getting to 125 pieces of 400 was a pretty good density within a carrier route. Carrier routes are now 600 and 700 pieces per delivery point, delivery points per route, 600 or 700 potential stops. So we created the high density plus. So now if you can get 300 out of 600, that's a fairly deep penetration separate from saturation. So it used to be, before co-mail and before all this technology, that only the very largest mailers could qualify for high density, to be mailing in such a targeted area that you could get 125 pieces for carry route. I think of the old JCPenney catalogs. We thought of it as a JCPenney rate because they would mail around the malls and where their stores were. So it was, in my mind, and the point of that as a product category was to recognize how high volume, geographically focused advertisers. And it was a backdoor volume discount. That was a way that, without saying, okay, because to get to that density, you had to be a large mailer to get it. So it was never supposed to be work sharing. It didn't reflect the fact that just because there were 125 pieces to a carrier route that we necessarily saved any money. It's all about the size of that bundle. So if the most pieces you can put in a bundle is 25 pieces, that just meant you had 5 25-piece bundles. Maybe you had 25 pieces in a bundle for carrier route. So the cost to us is exactly the same. It's just a function of the size of the bundle. Now, there's a probability that mail that qualifies for high density will have more pieces in a bundle than a rate category where you only have to have 10 pieces. And that's the minimum for carrier route. So there could be a small cost avoidance or cost difference, but technically there's no significant cost difference to the Postal Service. So therefore, our offering large incentives for co-mail, for printers to take mail from a lot of different advertisers, mailers, and combine those to qualify for high density didn't save the Postal Service anything. And so our contribution margin, it would be really low, and in fact, I believe it's still underwater for high density. So that's why we're continuing to raise that price. Again, if, as the original intent was to recognize high-volume mailers, you know, we need to consider, do we leave it in place for an individual CRID or MID? And if you can qualify on your own, hallelujah, you get a lower price because you're probably a bigger mailer. But we haven't gotten that far. Right now, we just need to even get the rate category to a compensatory level. And then we can think through what is the future of that. But to the extent that co-mailing allows lower postage rates, allows there to be mail in the system, it used to be that apparently this high density rate allowed you to prepare denser pallets. That's really what we want. So I don't want to have an unintended consequence of not having these full 5-digit pallets or SCF pallets. But we want to separately recognize that and not have a high density rate as a proxy to get a more full pallet, if that makes sense. So we just want to directly recognize what is saving the Postal Service work. Okay. Mike.
I was not surprised, but I was maybe disappointed that there was no effort by the Postal Service to create a special, not special, but a distinct rate for election mail. Was that considered at all, and will that be considered before the next presidential election? Because it seems, at least from my perspective, that election mail is becoming an increasingly important component and having a measurable impact on volumes in a cyclical pattern. And are you guys going to do anything about that with rates?
Great question, and yes, we are certainly. I think the first priority is to make sure we have a good ballot product for the ballots with unique mailing standards, characteristics to make sure the ballots are prepared in such a way that they can be properly handled and tracked. But separately, it's not just election mail, but we are, as Mike has often challenged us, and as we want to think through it, thinking about what would it look like if we created our product categories not on shapes and a level of pre-sort, but on use cases. So had a product called catalogs, had a product called election mail, had a product called nonprofit, had a product called direct mail, right? So looking at higher buckets of use cases, ultimately our cost structure is going to be based on the shape of the mail, how deep it's entered, whether it has a good address, and so forth. But so we're looking at, do you pull together, and marriage mail would be the other category. And then you can separately track demand, understand what the demand, where's potpourri of catalogs, separate from, there you go, from catalogs, from direct mail, from nonprofit. We could maybe more directly track the multiplier effect of nonprofit generating remittance pieces and so forth. So I think it's a longer term. The underlying cost structure will influence our rates from a regulatory point of view. And in fact, some of the prices might be the exact same for similarly shaped and pre-sorted mail in the different product categories, but wouldn't have to be. So that's a maybe before I retire, but it's not imminent. But ballot mail could be.
Regarding drop shipping, and as you're tinkering around with the rates, just keep in mind one thing, and Kelly, you might touch on this later on today, is freight rates, right? So we always look at freight rates, the cost of freight.
I was thinking perfume. Okay.
I wasn't, but so with that analogy that we go through, and we look at net savings and what drives a client to drop ship, right? As freight rates are increasing, keep in mind that you could inadvertently send a price signal which says, don't drop ship, you're better off per piece postage to not drop ship. And I think that's the last thing that you really want to do, is handling pallets from our dock throughout the whole distribution network.
Well, if we get our network right and we get our price signals right, efficient component pricing would have us price it so that we would be agnostic. We would have the same markup on full network as we did on dropship. So when you look, when those bars are even, And if we had them even across the board, then we would have the same profit level, whether it was full, because it would cost more, but we would have a higher postage on it, and so we would have the same markup no matter where it was entered. Now, it gets back into the reliability. We want mail to be reliable. We want to have on-time service performance so that mail continues to have an ROI. And right now, our service is much better the more deeply it's drop shipped. So to the extent that drop shipping it gives a better ROI for mail, that's good for everybody. But our challenge is to make sure we fix our network, so no matter where you drop it, you can plan your in-home date. That's where we want to go. Okay, periodicals. We've only got 2 more of these. It'll go fast. Whew. All right, so periodicals, a whole different way, thanks to Time Inc., of submitting a rate design to the regulator that the regulator adopted. We have a totally different structure for calculating postage for periodicals. We charge by how many bundles are used, how many tubs are used, how many pallets are used, then per piece and per pound. And based on a conversation that we had with Quad, back to if you have rate relationships, if you want to question our logic, if you want to talk to us about the intended or unintended consequences of some rate designs, they pulled up how they make decisions in, or how you would have them make decisions. When we set the prices for periodicals, we unzoned it. We set the same price regardless of distance. Bound printed matter and periodicals were the 2 products that were distance-based. Marketing mail and first class are not. So back to syncing things up, and as we look at changing our zoning structure for the package side, I don't want it to trigger a cap impact on the market dominant side. So we made the prices the same regardless of distance. And they're like, yeah, well, we're not gonna drop ship the long distance stuff. Not exactly what in all of periodicals is underwater. So we went back and looked at what other levers are we not pulling to, and they also pointed out much bigger incentive to drop ship marketing mail than periodicals, and hello, they look the same. Why are the signals so different? So we looked back into the way this rate design worked and realized we had not been adjusting editorial pounds in many, many years. Blew my mind. We had a conversation with the analyst. They count 2, and in fact, in this case, we have raised the editorial pound rate if it's not drop shipped, and I don't know if we lowered it or just didn't raise it as much for the editorial pounds. We also, these container rates, depending on where the containers enter our network, and so we raised the price for origin entered pallets a lot more than more deeply drop ship pallets. So again, there are other levers that we could pull other than advertising pounds, which would encourage drop shipping.
Question.
Yes.
So, comment, question. So in the last 2 rate cases, you've had a substantial change in the piece rate portion of 5-digit. So in the last 2 rate cases, you've had a substantial change in the difference between 5-digit and carrier route. So with these increasing costs and increasing postage and paper is a factor too, our rate bases are going down and we are mailing less. So what's happening is we're having less copies in carrier route that are going to 5 digits. So even when we were at a high carrier route, when we go to 5-digit, we're just getting killed. And it's going to be a death spiral because if you keep spreading that gap and making it harder, we're going to have to go to fewer subscribers, and then we keep hitting the higher rate.
So the way that we're regulated, I say that our discounts can't exceed the costs that are avoided, but the regulator also put in additional constraints, which is we need to get up to at least 85% of our cost avoidance and increase it by, so some of our discounts are much less than the cost avoidance. We have to raise those discounts by 20 points each price cycle until we get to at least 85%. Then safe harbor is between 85% and 100, and I won't bother you with all the additional constraints. Once it's 100, it can't go back down. So we are going to be required to, and in fact, the regulator asks us every year, how are you doing about incenting carrier route? Because you say it's cheaper. So we are required to continue to expand that discount or that gap until it's at least 85% of our cost avoidance.
It's going to drive mail out of this.
Understood. Okay, any other questions or things? Usually, and that's ironic, because usually I have the other side going, carrier route isn't big, a deep enough discount, so here's a 5-digit mailer that says, stop it. So that was the first time I've heard that side of the argument, but we are regulatory obligated to adjust that discount. Questions about periodicals? Are you guys getting tired and bored with this too? We go through package services. I guess there are some bound printed matter flats and parcels in the room. So as I had mentioned at the top, this is an underwater, just as periodicals was underwater, we had 8.5%. Same with package services. This is an 8.5% that we spread. The bound printed matter was underwater, but so is media library, and media library is more underwater and has been underwater longer than bound printed matter parcels, yet the PRC directed us at in their annual compliance determination in March that we had to take 2 points more on bound printed matter flats. Not on media mail, but just bound printed matter flats. So we complied with it, but now we have petitioned the PRC to reconsider. Because when you go back to doing that cap math, there are other places that we would have spent that cap other than on bound printed matter parcels. And as I had mentioned, the only profitable product was bound printed matter flats, so that got a much lower increase, so that bound printed matter parcels got the required 2 points more than average. I think that's the only slide I have on that. Any questions about package services? Special services then, last slide, is back to 6.5. They're not hundreds, there are dozens of special services. These are the most commonly used special services. Money orders were underwater, so we put more on that. And then insurance is on the market dominant side, but it supports competitive products. When we baked in, we effectively took the price from insurance between $50 and $100 to zero, so that $100 of insurance is included with priority mail now. That was an effective price decrease on the market dominant side for insurance. And you'll see the CAS and the MAS, the addressing systems. We had different prices based on when in the cycle those services were used, and we just made it time agnostic. So depending on the timing, some went up, some went down. Okay, now we can take more questions. Apparently I've got 12 minutes left. Yeah, these are, they've got them, they're totally shareable. And in fact, the only thing new in this were those bar charts around the size of the discounts. As I'd mentioned, as soon as we file price changes, the Postal Service does, won't even look, the Postal Service does industry webinars, and so these versions of these slides have been available since a day or two after we filed. So yes, is the short answer. Oh, increasing the rate, increasing the discount. I was like, somebody's thanking me for increasing a rate? Right, so the way inflation was tracking, I believe our analyst said it's about 3.2, it might be up to 3.5 when that 8.5 came out. So roughly it's 3%, that's all the authority we would have. Flats within marketing mail would then have to be 5%. Something would have to be lower. So if we change prices, that's the ballpark as of right now, based on who can predict inflation, but what Global Insights would forecast. We would do inflation from, we used March's inflation that came out in April to September's inflation, which will come out in October. No, August's inflation, which comes out in September. So that time span is what would influence the January price change. Right. It had to be, I think 1.5 was roughly, and we haven't calculated it lately, but inflation less than 1.5 for that time frame, you can't do 2 points on that and then lower something else, so it would be a pogo stick. Last chance. I'll be here till lunch. You're welcome to beat me up in private. And then I'm heading back. There is a board meeting tomorrow, and I have to get back, which usually signals something. I will say in our tech specs that we send out, we have signaled that we are exploring cubic pricing for our ground product. That would require a vote of our governors. So maybe more to come on the competitive side. Turn it back to.
I guess I'll take this one. Thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
We always love having you. It's good to be doing that.